On this episode of Lapeef, Let's Talk.
Right. So I said I've been with my girl. We're going on 6 years this year. We got married a couple weeks ago. How likely is that to happen? Not very likely, on average for most people. The reason why is because most people, male or female, like the woman may want marriage and men want marriage too. But once you in a relationship, people have a tendency to get complacent. And if you don't have a real direction and purpose for why you together to begin with, it just becomes easier and easier. You know what I'm saying? When they talk about why buy the cow when you get the milk for free? Like that's a real thing, right? But does like I don't consider now, let me say this also. I don't consider myself an anomaly. I do know people in real life, like you have conversation with some of these married folk, and they'll say, you'll ask them, like, so how long y'all been together? And they'll tell you how long they dated, which was multiple years, 2 or better. And then they'll say, but we've been married for this amount of time.
Jesus, I think that you start to lean into the relationship to being dope, and every year just becomes better. So once you get over all of the little issues and all the little problems and trying to figure out the nuances and learning the person and, you know, going through the ups and downs, because you got to see people at their best, you got to see people at their worst. And I don't think that you can see that when you just casually dating or you just in a relationship. I think that you got to live with that person. You got to see them, you know, go through something. You got to see what happens and how they move and how they adjust and, you know, how they become a woman or a man right before your very eyes. So I think that long term should be defined as a decade or more married, because then you get to see every aspect of a person. And then, and only then, when you've overcome all that stuff and you still decide that you want to be married, then that's what I consider long term. Everything else from before that is temporary, in my opinion.
But you're talking about marriage. Yeah. What is long term relationship for you to end it up in marriage?
I'm sorry, what is long term what?
To end in marriage, meaning how long is a long term for someone to be in before they get married?
So basically in a relationship or courting.
Yeah.
I think within 6 months to a year, you should know whether or not you want to marry that person. Anything beyond that is wasting time. And the older you get, the more time you're wasting. So the timeline shortens as you get older.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
Mm-hmm. All right. What's your thoughts about it, Trey? How likely, well, what's considered a long time?
I say anywhere between 5 to 10 years, somewhere around there. And I think you don't even really know the person until you're about a year and some change in. And I think that's when all of the facade kind of wears off and you get to see that person for who they really is. And then after that, you know, again, y'all, you know, it's kind of honeymoon stage involving, but I don't think you really hit long term until y'all reach some type of adversity. I'm not talking about like the petty little arguments. I'm talking about like some real adversity. It's like Anton talking about babies and different things like that. Like that's real adversity that you run into, and then it's like, okay. Once we done experienced that, got through that, and still able to maintain a level of I don't like saying happiness. I feel like happiness is relative, but like a level of stability. After that, then it's long term. So I think that sweet spot somewhere in between 5 and 10 years, something like that.
So the topic as a transition is he spoke on what I asked, but I'm asking like how likely is it for a long-term relationship to end in marriage? So we kind of set a bar a little bit around the panel as far as what they consider to be a long term. So how likely is it to happen past that? So I heard somebody said, True, you said 5 years, right?
Yeah,
5 years is probably
somewhere between 5 and 10. Yeah.
Yeah, because go ahead. I'm sorry, Courtney.
Yeah. Well, I had a question for Trill. So if someone was together and they're not married for 3 years, you wouldn't consider that a long-term relationship they're in?
No. No, like I said, long term is between 5 and 10.
I got a question.
Longer than 3 years.
I don't mean to throw a curveball in this though, but now everybody's saying that you need all this time to really evaluate somebody and all that kind of stuff, trials and tribulations. But just last week we was talking about some knowing a person hold everything in 4 hours.
No, that's true.
It out of
You can know a person.
I think he's taking it out of context. No one said you knew a whole
He
person.
talking specifically to me, so I'm gonna talk
One at a
directly
time,
back
one
to
at a
him.
No,
It
I'm
was
talking
out
to
of
you. I'm talking
context.
to
No.
You're not talking to me.
It's the humble dad. It's not just to you.
No, it's me too, Anton. It's me.
Well, no, I started it though.
Remember logic.
I established the
Again,
cadence.
What
I
did I
established the
miss?
cadence, so I'm gonna address it specifically. What I said, the logic was that you can tell whether or not a woman is for the streets or if she's feminine immediately. You can tell whether or not she's not supposed to be in the club or not, if she a fish out of water, if she shouldn't be hanging or she got dragged out there by her girls. You can tell whether she putting on a front or whatever, so on and so forth. When we talking about being in a relationship, you're talking about an endurance race, not a sprint. This is when you're trying to figure out whether or not a person or a man or a woman, and we talking both. We're not just talking about women. This is when you're talking about whether or not somebody can cut it, right? If they've been raised a certain way to be able to endure through hard times and difficult times, not femininity or whether or not you for the streets. It's a completely different conversation and context.
Yeah, I think the question JR asked specifically was, can you tell whether or not a woman is feminine within 4 hours? Yes, you can. Logic is talking about, can you tell that this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life within 4 hours? No, you cannot. And that wasn't the question he asked. So that's being very disingenuous logic.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. I concur.
You're not trying to have a good faith argument, Logic?
I said he took that all out of context.
Oh, look at that. Got the damn frog.
It's
What
a
the hell is
chameleon.
that?
It's not a
Oh,
frog.
chameleon. Oh, okay. Okay, well, shit.
Give me my
Okay.
NFT SIM card, man. I want my SIM card.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, that's the question I'm posing right now is how likely is somebody to get married when they're in that long-term relationship? Because women want to get married, sort of what they say. I mean, for all the wrong reasons, all the right reasons, however you want to cut it, they want to get married. And so often they find themselves waiting on the man. That's what I've been hearing out here in these streets. So what's considered a long time before you're able to get into that marriage? Like before you can just say like, fuck it, like I'm done. Like this ain't it. And then a follow-up question I want to ask is, what are some of the reasons as to why men just want to be in relationships for that long?
All right, let's go. Let me jump in on this and let's go with a real life example of a person that was in a long-term relationship and got married. Right. So I said I've been with my girl. We're going on 6 years this year. We got married a couple weeks ago. How likely is that to happen? Not very likely on average for most people. The reason why is because most people, male or female, like the woman may want marriage and men want marriage too. But once you in a relationship, people have a tendency to get complacent. And if you don't have a real direction and purpose for why you together to begin with, it just becomes easier and easier. You know what I'm saying? When they talk about why buy the cow when you get the milk for free? Like that's a real thing, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't consider, now let me say this also, I don't consider myself an anomaly. I do know people in real life, like you have conversation with some of these married folk and they'll say, you'll ask them like, so how long y'all been together? And they'll tell you how long they dated, which was multiple years, 2 or better. And then they'll say, but we've been married for this amount of time.